Hey guys, Everseen here. So today I wanted to make a guide about how to level the monk, and this is going to be totally targeted behind a fresh start. This is not going to be with any leveling uniques, anything like that. I'm not going to be focused on trade. This is more of an SSF approach, so obviously trade is a much easier game mode, so you can figure out for yourself if you want to buy certain weapons or whatever, but I have no knowledge about economies and stuff really because I just play SSF all the time. I like to just play with all the gear that I've found, and that's just really how it is. Now, the monk is one of the best fresh start experiences, in my opinion, and that is just mostly due to freeze being an extremely strong mechanic, especially when you're fighting on bosses. With the combination of bell and ice strike and charge staff, you can really melt bosses through one freeze duration, and even some bosses that don't even have a chance to fight before you've frozen them and killed them completely. So I think this is really strong, especially if you're a complete brand new player. It might not be the best thing to do. It's probably good if you're an experienced player because mostly you do kind of want to learn what the bosses do, what their mechanics do, how to dodge them and stuff. So yeah, monk is kind of like easy mode right now for progression. But yeah, this is definitely one of the best fresh start builds for sure right now. Okay, so let's dig in. I am sitting in Act 1 right now, and I just want to preface this by saying the number one tip that I can give you is check the vendor window at every single level. So whether you're level 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, every single time that you level, this whole window is going to refresh. This other person here, not this lady, it's actually Una. So her whole window is going to refresh, and you can find flasks, you can find rings from her, maybe even a belt. I don't know. I think it's just rings and amulets. But basically, every single level, this is going to refresh. So you want to be checking weapons. Weapons is like the most first thing that you want to check for when you're leveling, because we need physical damage flat or physical damage percent on our weapon to sort of scale our ice strike and all of our other abilities. Physical damage is just the best. Another thing that you can look for is elemental damage on weapons. So you can see this one has fire damage. That's just going to give you like extra damage. What we predominantly want to see is either cold damage or lightning damage. So there are three elements, which is fire, cold, and lightning for flat elemental damage on a weapon. For some reason, fire and cold have less of a range, and by range I mean like this one's 9 to 15, than lightning damage. So lightning damage, even in Path of Exile 1, was just a much bigger range than the other two elements. So say, you know, fire is 1 to 10, cold is 1 to 10, well, lightning could be 1 to 35, and for some reason just has a bigger damage range. So even getting lightning damage on a weapon while you're progressing is still going to be very nice. Now, the next piece of gear that you want to be looking for is boots. So you want to go immediately over to this window and look at the boots. And luckily for me, I have 2 movement speed rare boots right now. They're going to be way too much when you first start playing to buy them. So like these two, they would just be unattainable. But sometimes you'll see magic boots that have movement speed on them, and movement speed is king pretty much for progression. You want to be getting and looking for movement speed and upgrading your movement speed as much as possible. And then the other thing too is like some of these body armors can be really good. Like for example, you can get life and cold resistance. This would be like a best in slot for Act 1 because if you don't know, the Act 1 boss is pretty much cold damage. So we want to be cold resistance capped as soon as possible, basically. Try to get a bank of gold. And what I mean by a bank of gold is try to get like at least like say 10,000 gold. And don't spend that 10,000 gold. And the only reason why I say that is because sometimes you will come across a really good weapon in the vendors that is rare and it costs significantly more gold. Like if we look at this bow, it's only 300 gold, but if we look at this bow, it's 2,500 gold. So I ran into some situations where I was leveling and basically I would come across a rare item that costed way too much gold and I had no gold disposable to buy it. And this sucks because some of them can be huge upgrades from a vendor. So the only downside to this is that when you level up, the vendor window is going to refresh, right? So sometimes you're not able to collect enough gold from killing mobs and whatever to stay within that level range to actually go back to the vendor and buy something. So typically what I am going to start doing, which I didn't do, and I lost a couple good rare items due to this, is I'm going to keep like a bank of like say 10,000 gold, and I'm never going to spend less than 10,000 gold so that if I do come across a really good upgrade, I'm able to purchase it. Alrighty, so my second tip is going to be whenever you're at the vendors, if you do have extra gold, and I'm talking like a lot of extra gold. I mean, I have like 1,000,000, so it's pretty irrelevant. But yeah, if you have extra gold, or even just like while you're progressing through the world, if you find any gear that says superior on it, pick it up. And if you also find any gear with sockets on it, pick it up as well. What you can do is you can go over to the salvage bench and you can break down both of these items. The superior weapons will give you blacksmith whetstones, and the spellcasting weapons will give you arcanist etchers, and then all superior armor pieces will give you armor scraps. And then also the socketed gear will give you these artificer shards, which when you get 10 become a artificer orb, which can give you a socket on your items. So sockets are going to be really important, especially when you're trying to get resistances on gear early on. Now to just touch on runes too, just a second. I think it's kind of weird that we only have like, see, there's fire damage, cold damage. There's also a lightning damage one, yeah, for flat. You can see there too, the rolls are different, like 7 to 11 fire damage, 6 to 10 cold damage, and then 1 to 20 lightning damage. So that just further proves my hypothesis about lightning damage having a bigger range, if none of you believed me. Anyways, so moving on. If you do happen to get a good flat physical damage weapon, it is worth it to just use that weapon and also just put a couple sockets on it and give it 40% increased physical damage, right? So that's kind of why I think it's weird that they didn't add flat physical damage, because it would have solved a little bit more pressure on gear. This is just a leveling staff I put on my guy, just to kind of show like this is a bad staff, but I used it. But yeah, it would have been nice, like say I have 22% increased physical damage, if I could have put a couple flat runes on this to like boost it up a bit more. But I'm not sure why they did that. Maybe they will in the future. But yeah, as of right now, iron runes are the most valuable thing for your weapons while you're trying to progress. And then stats like attack speed is really nice. And then +2 to level melee skills just gives you a little extra boost in damage. This can actually be a negative thing because it can make your abilities cost too much mana, and that's kind of bad for us. Now, another thing for when you're new to Path of Exile 2 that you're not going to know is that skills in this game, basically they work funny with your cursor. I'm not sure how much this works for WASD movements, so just forgive me if it's not relevant to you, but if you're using click to move like I am, this is going to be extremely relevant. So in any of your skills panel, there's like an arrow here that'll open up the panel, and you can see that it shows like weapon sets, cool, but it's always attack without moving. So I have it unallocated just to show you, but I pretty much allocate this to every single skill that I ever use. It just makes the feel of it much better. So when you don't have this equipped, basically what happens is that the further away you put your cursor from your character, the more your character is going to say, oh, okay, if you're way outside on the screen, I have to run over to that direction in order to cast my ability. Whereas if you had to attack with attack without moving, that means even if I had my cursor way over here, my guy's just going to cast the skill no matter what. So how this works really good is like, say, let's use a Wave of Frost as an example. So Wave of Frost traditionally is just, it sends a Wave of Frost and you do a little step back, which is nice to get away from enemies if you cast it a few times and cause a lot of freeze buildup, maybe freezing the enemies that are chasing you so you can get away. But it works only if you put your crosshair right next to your guy, right? So watch when I put my crosshair away from my guy. See how he runs all the way over in order to use the skill? So this can actually get you killed because, like, what if you're running into mobs and not using a skill and then the mob hits you, stuns you, and you die? So that's an example of why I really like using the always attack without moving. So let's put that on. And then watch this. I can have my cursor at the top of my screen. I can just spam the button and my guy just goes backwards, 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 and behaves how you traditionally think that the game would behave, but for some reason it's not like that. This is something that stems from PoE 1. This has been kind of a thing that's always existed in PoE 1. So this is just an example of showing you how this is extremely useful in PoE 2 as well. Okay, so let's go over like the Act 1 skills and what you're kind of want to do. Yeah, so the only way you're going to get Ice Strike is when you get a skill gem level 5, which we can't have at the very start of the game. So we have to use some skills first, and, you know, there's not really that many great skills in the beginning, in my opinion. Falling Thunder is a really good skill because once you can get a power charge, which you can get with killing Palm, you can get a power charge to consume with Falling Thunder to do a big cascading wave. So I'll demonstrate that right now. basically I'm in the Act 1 zone, and I'm going to probably default attack, which is how you would want to do this, to get some damage on the enemy, and they will get primed for a Killing Palm, and then you will Killing Palm them, getting a power charge, and then Falling Thunder to get that animation. So typically, this is the animation without a power charge. You do nothing. You basically do damage right in front of you. Sure, it's okay. You pretty much have to Killing Palm, then Falling Thunder, but it's an extremely good skill for clearing if you can actually get the power charges from it, right? So the next skill that you're probably going to want to use is it's called Frozen Locust. So this is probably going to be more useful for bossing. Basically what it does is it pushes your character backwards, puts a little icicle, and then when you attack it, it does a little shockwave of ice, which is really good for freeze buildup. So I would recommend using this for bosses. Basically what I was using for bosses was pretty much, I'll just go into the skills panel again. It's Frozen Locust, and then I was using Glacial Cascade for damage, because you can use this at range and bosses don't typically move a whole lot. So you can actually aim this skill, because the way it works is you'll do, it's sort of like an icicle out. Like you see how there's little tiny icicles and then there's one big icicle? Well, that big one is basically the bulk of your damage. So what you can do is you can Frozen Locust like this, take a step back, and then do a Glacial Cascade on that and get almost like a double effect of like a huge amount of freeze. Now, obviously, when you get the Tempest Bell, use it. It is very good. You're going to want to use Bell and then just pretty much do whatever skill you can on top of it. It'd probably be Glacial Cascade to sort of give shockwaves. Bell isn't super important, though, until we get Ice Strike. So maybe just do, you know, kind of the combinations I mentioned, and then you can scale into Tempest Bell once you finally get your Ice Strike. So another thing about Bell is really until you get Ice Strike, you're not going to be able to use it anyway, because you're not going to do enough skills or strikes to get combo. So you need 4 combo in order to place this. Right now I'm pressing the button to actually place my Bell, and the game won't let me because I'm at 0. So what will happen is this will count up and you will get combo, which will then give you enough. See, I have 3, 4. Now I can place the Bell. Now I can start whacking on it. So Ice Strike, once you finally get it, is extremely good because it counts as all of the strikes, so you don't have to use different abilities to do so. And basically, like, now the game is complete. Now you have all that you need, and you just place your Bell when you can do it, and you just Ice Strike on top of it. Now, supports that I would use Ice Strike in the beginning is definitely more attack speed. The more attack speed you have, the more damage you're going to do. And then I would also use Cold Infusion, which is going to give you a lot more damage on your cold damage. If I can find it here. I just have all my skills everywhere, sorry. Supported attacks gain 25% of damage as extra cold damage, so this is going to be extremely good for Ice Strike. And then after that, I would probably go for Concentrated Effect, which is going to give you even more ridiculous damage, or maybe Primal Armament, but this also gives you a mana cost multiplier. So that's another thing, is that you want to be sort of avoiding all gems that give you a mana cost multiplier, so you can just have a really cheap, hard-hitting attack, which does a lot of damage. Okay, so the next ability I want to talk about is Charge Staff. So this is going to be really good once you finally get this. You need a level 9 skill gem in order to get this, but the whole interaction is basically, we are going to use the Spirit Gem, Combat Frenzy. So basically what Combat Frenzy does is every time you freeze an enemy, which we're going to be freezing lots of enemies, we're going to gain a Frenzy Charge. So you might think, well, Charge Staff consumes a power charge, so how are we going to use Combat Frenzy to get power charges? So we're going to use Resonance, which is a keystone on the passive tree, which is not very far from the Monk Start, which will give you power charges instead of the Frenzy Charges from Combat Frenzy. So that's how we're going to be getting our power charges, and they're pretty much automatic. So I kill this enemy, I freeze him, I get a power charge, and then we also have the Support Gem, which can give us an additional power charge. So getting 3 power charges is pretty damn easy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to consume with Charge Staff, and then now we have projectiles. So what's nice about this skill is that when you're using the Bell, like this, you're getting 6 hits on the Bell, as opposed to 3. So what I mean by this is that Charge Staff, the projectile, counts as 1, and also you're striking in front of your guy, which is giving you 1 strike. So when you place a Bell, you're hitting traditionally 1, 2, 3, but like when you have Charge Staff, it counts as an extra hit, so you're getting 6 hits on your Bell instead of 3. So it gives you a lot of damage. Plus, it gives you flat added lightning damage, which is really good. So Resonance plus that is like the S tier, like pretty much the only way to use Monk. Like, it's just so good that it's ridiculous if you don't use it. So that's pretty much what you're going to want to strive for. Okay, so the next skill I want to demonstrate, which is you're going to want to use much later, but it's Shattering Palm. So the thing about Shattering Palm is that it has added crit chance and stuff. And you can see there's shards on all these enemies. And you can even see this in like the skill description. They have a duration. Basically, when they have shards on them, they melt off their face or whatever. But I can do that, get the shards, and then all the stuff will freeze or shatter in the area of your actual... That's weird, that guy froze. Like, actually froze. Animation froze. Yeah, but you Shattering Palm, and then a bunch of shards go out, and then once you kill the enemies, it does a huge explosion. So that's exactly how you want to play it. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is once you start scaling into your heralds. So this is going to be late campaign, early map sort of thing. Basically, what you're going to want to do is do Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. They're probably only going to be on a 4-link for now, or like a 3-link. So I'll take these 2 gems away kind of thing. Take these 2 gems away. Basically, Herald of Thunder, we're going to do Ambush for more crit chance, and then Glaciation for more freeze buildup. Hopefully, you're going to have, you know, enough cold damage to definitely freeze with Herald of Thunder, and then you want to shock with Herald of Ice. So once you get, you know, 5 links, you can even add more gems, which are beneficial to it. But I'm going to kind of go over just like the very bare bones, like initial setup. So Herald of Thunder, we're going to have Ambush because we want a crit chance on our Herald of Thunder, because once we crit, it's going to freeze. So we have more freeze buildup, so it's going to give us a lot easier time to freeze. And then for Herald of Ice, this is our mega explosion. So whenever we kill an enemy, this is what's actually going to cause that explosion, and then chain react with other explosions. And then it's going to Herald of Thunder. Anyway, it bounces back and forth. It's kind of a whole thing. So we're going to use Magnified Effect, and then we're going to use Lightning Infusion. So this is going to give Herald of Ice more lightning damage, take away less cold damage, but that's fine because we're going to be ping-ponging off these 2 heralds. Another thing you could do too is add Cold Infusion. I didn't really do this because I wanted to use Ice Strike with Cold Infusion because it really buffs Ice Strike and is really good early on. So that's how I feel. But if you're struggling on explosions, maybe put Cold Infusion in instead of Ambush. But I think with Ambush, it should be good enough if you've been scaling into some crit and stuff on the passive tree, because basically that's what you do in the beginning. By the time you're getting your heralds up and running, you're going to want to start scaling into Hand of Chayula. So you want to get rid of your Shattering Palm, because basically Shattering Palm and the herald setup do the exact same thing. They cause an entire explosion for clear, which is going to help your build. But what we want is now, once you start getting into the higher level content, you want Hand of Chayula with Freezing Mark for better freeze buildup, and Hypothermia to give minus cold res, and then also increased effective curses to get even more minus cold res. So what this is going to do for single target on a boss is it's just going to give you way better freeze buildup to freeze a boss and then completely wail on it and probably kill it within 1 freeze duration. Now, other spirit gems that I would use, typically though, until you get a really good body armor, you're not going to be able to use like more than probably 3 spirit gems. So even like early on, I would probably only use like Combat Frenzy and say Herald of Ice, and then probably go straight into Grim Feast as quick as you possibly can, depending on how much energy shield you have. I would probably, if you had like 1,000 energy shield, 1,500, 2,000 would be ideal, but like you could start whenever you want. But Grim Feast is obviously going to be the best way now. I think this is going to get nerfed, so I wouldn't be too focused on Grim Feast, but for right now, definitely use it. It is giving you overflow energy shield. It is effectively doubling your energy shield right now, just from wailing on a few enemies. I have 6,300 out of 4,000, so, you know, it's working really well, and you want to use it as much as you can. Another thing that you can use is Wind Dancer. This is going to be an extremely good defensive buff that you're going to want to use. Putting quality on this gem gives you a +1 maximum stages, which is going to help greatly. And yeah, you're going to use things like Culling Strike on it. Blind is really good because it's just going to effectively make your evasion more potent, because when you blind an enemy, they have less accuracy and we're already having a chance to evade. So it just kind of like pads your evasion rating. And then Maim is going to give us more physical damage, which is going to help for the bell. So Yeah, Calling Strike, it's just the Wind Dancer. It's like a shockwave that goes off from your character. It could hit the boss and could cull it. Cool. It's just an extra support gem we have in there because there's no downside to having it. So I could go over the passive tree in full depth and all that stuff, but I figure it's probably easier to organize my thoughts and to make sure I don't overlook anything if I just leave that to the mobalytics guide. So I'm basically just going to, because like I go in here and I refund that and I refund this, and there's so much like mix and match change and stuff that it's probably easier if I just write it all down in mobalytics. So that will be in the description if you guys want to check it out, and then you can kind of see like step by step the leveling process, how to path and whatever, and what to go out of and then into another thing and so on and so forth. And yeah, we're basically just scaling into as much crit chance as we can. Right now, my crit hit chance is really not that good. I only have, let's see, 39% on my Ice Strike, which is not the greatest. I have 34 if I put this staff on. I had a bit better base crit chance on my weapon on this. Another thing about staves is depending on the base, one will have slightly better mods than another. I'm not entirely sure exactly which ones do which, but it looks like Gothic, for example, has better base crit chance, which is 11.5%, and this one has only 10%. So another thing about weapons that's extremely important to talk about that a new player might not have any idea of, and especially the scaling, is that, so for example, you can see that this only gives me 1.5% more crit hit chance than this weapon, right? But if I put this weapon on, I have 39% crit hit chance, and this one has 34. You're thinking 1.5, but that's like a 5% increase. How is that possible? Well, basically, when you have a weapon with a very high crit hit chance, this is your base crit hit chance. So basically what that means is anytime you click on an increased critical chance node, it's scaling your weapon's base critical hit chance. So all of these increase are going to scale off of this initial number of 11.5%, which is why having crit chance on your weapon is a really good stat to have. Okay, so now let's talk about gearing. Basically, I'm going to go over each piece of gear and say kind of like what mods you're going to want to look for. We kind of covered the weapon already. Really, the weapon is just flat physical damage, percentage physical damage, attack speed is really good, and then crit hit chance and crit damage bonus if you can get it, like cool. If you can't, don't sweat it. It's really just the physical damage and the attack speed that are important. Even the attack speed is not super important because Monk just has so much attack speed anyway, and we can take so much on the passive tree. Just try and get a weapon with a lot of fizz damage. The more fizz damage, the more cold damage you're going to do with Ice Strike. Now, the next piece of gear that you're going to want to focus is probably going to be your body armor. So, especially early on in the campaign, evasion is going to be really useful if you have a lot of it. So we want to kind of focus on getting as much evasion as possible. This is going through just an evasion chest piece. We don't really want to do evasion energy shield hybrid because what that does is it gives you overall less evasion rating. And we're not too worried about energy shield until later on, maybe in maps, maybe in, you know, the second half of the campaign in cruel difficulty. So just go for straight evasion rating on every piece of gear you can possibly get. Like go for your helmet having evasion, your boots, your gloves, and your body armor, and you're gonna have enough that you evade probably like 50, 60, maybe 70% of all attacks, which is just going to make you a lot tankier while you're progressing. Now, the nice thing about Monk is that we're very versatile in the amount of gear that we can actually equip. So instead of like playing like, say, a warrior type, where I just played that and I could only really do armor gear, I could go armor evasion, but I needed dex requirements, which you don't have because you need to stack a ton of strength. Anyway, that's a whole other issue about warrior that I didn't like. And Monk, we don't really have to satisfy a lot. We do dex and int pretty passively anyway, so having, you know, we have access to evasion gear, we have access to evasion and energy shield gear, and then if you're really hurting but you get a really nice piece of gear, you could just use energy shield gear. In late stages of the game though, you are going to want to go like pure energy shield gear because that's obviously how we're going to scale having energy shield, especially if you're going chaos inoculation. So the main rule of thumb is do evasion because it's going to give you the most evasion, especially for campaign. And then evasion hybrid with energy shield is nice. If you get a nice piece of gear, definitely put it on. And then energy shield is more like the late game. Like that's going to be like the last thing you sort of focus on. So yeah, like basically my gear right now is pretty much just I'm focusing heavily into energy shield here. And like the gloves, I can't really get much out of this, but these gloves are absolutely insane for damage, so that's what I'm using. These for gloves endgame, this is the best in slot. I can confidently say that this is probably the best set of gloves that you can possibly get. Do not go for any other gloves. Basically right now I'm sitting here 58k tooltip. If I take these off, it's almost a 20% damage increase basically. So use these gloves, man. They're insane. But yeah, so for your like leveling, obviously you can just go for better things like resistances and stuff. Another stat that you might like, which I just had on my gloves that I was using previously, was physical damage leech does mana. So right here I have really nice resistances, and fizz damage leech does mana. Even though we don't do a ton of fizz damage, we do a decent amount of fizz damage with the bell though, because bell is pretty much all physical, and you're just going to get tons of mana from it leeching. So definitely this stat's really good. Later on though, you want physical damage as mana on rings. That's pretty much like a mandatory stat once you get into the late game. Right now I'm actually missing my mana leech, so I need to find a ring that has it. But yeah, for rings, I would say pretty much just res cap throughout the campaign. Try and get as much res as you can, as much life as you can. If you get cold damage or lightning damage, cool. If you get cold or flat lightning damage, like that's cool too. But yeah, late game, you're going to want to strive for, say, a ring like this. So I got really lucky on this ring. I ended up rolling T8 flat lightning damage to attacks. The life means nothing to me. Really good rarity, plus all res and fire res. So this is like a completed ring. This is perfect. But yeah, you want like percentage cold damage gives you a big DPS boost, and both cold and flat lightning damage does. I don't really like to have increased lightning damage because we're not really trying to scale lightning damage on this build. It's Ice Strike, therefore, so you want to like scale the cold damage really. So having, you know, I wore a ring that had like 30% increased cold damage. Yeah, right here, this was like my really good ring that I was using. So that gave me quite a bit of DPS boost, right? And then on your belt is pretty much just life and resistances, guys. Like just go, you know, crazy, try and get a ton of resistances because it is kind of hard to cap when you are trying to use runes that are not resistance runes. When you are leveling, you're going to want to use resistance ones like I did on this body armor. But yeah, once you get into the late game, it's all, you know, I want increased evasion and energy shield here so I can get more spirit, more evasion overall. Now for the amulet, it's basically just attributes is nice. And then I have evasion rating. Increased evasion rating helps a lot, especially through the campaign. And then increased max life, or, you know, I got lucky with that, but having flat life is really good. And then damage taken recouped as mana was just like an extra added bonus because obviously, you know, we're going to just get more mana. So mana is going to be kind of an issue on this build. If you have Giga attack speed and you're running out of mana all the time, try to just take out maybe some attack speed and go into like reduced cost of skills is nice, and mana regeneration rate. Or there's another one somewhere too. There's 25% increased amount of mana leech. You could do that. I didn't do either of these things, but I had some mana issues with my guy. So that's kind of like something to look for, right? So if you have Giga attack speed, but you're not able to attack, what's the point? Might as well try and invest a little bit more into mana, and then you'll be good. Another thing too that you can do, which I've started doing, is with the bell, I have leech 5% of physical attack damage from supported skills as mana. So whenever my bell is up, I'm basically just like not really losing any mana because most of Bell's damage is going to be fizz damage. So we can see it does a lot of fizz damage here, which is going to give us a lot of leech. So that, and then I also have fonts of mana, which are going to give me increased mana regeneration, which is just going to help keep your mana up so that you can keep doing burst damage. So one thing that I did mention in my last video that is really good and really budget is to use Atziri's Disdain. So I'm just going to explain the interaction again, just as it's a new video, and new players are probably not going to understand this completely, but basically whenever you're using Atziri's Disdain, there's a mod on there that says 21% of damage taken bypasses your energy shield. So traditionally, when you take damage in the game, if you have energy shield, it's going to take like all of your energy shield away, and then it will start doing damage to your life. So what this is doing is it's making it so that even if I have energy shield, I'm still taking damage to my life. And you might think, well, that's not really what you want to have. Here, I'll get rid of Chaos Inoculation because it gives you 1 life, and it'll give me my life back so that I can kind of demonstrate how this works. But basically, I have 1,500 life and 4,000 energy shield. And what this is going to do is 21% of my damage is going to go to my life. And the way that I actually recover life back is by using a support gem called Cannibalism. So what Cannibalism does is every time you kill something, you get 4% of your life recovered. So this is going to help you sustain your life, and it's going to take some damage off of your energy shield, if you get what I mean. So instead of 100% of damage going to your energy shield, now it's only 79% damage. So you can kind of see how that splits the damage numbers, and it helps you soak more damage, but you're also just still recovering. So the thing about Grim Feast too is we're recovering energy shield every time we grab a remnant. So this is basically double recovery and double soaking of damage, which is why I used it. It also gave me 20% rarity, so why not use it? Another thing about this helmet too that's really crazy is that it gives 29% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. If any of you guys have seen how busted Ghost Wraith is right now, basically it takes whatever your life is or would be, is going to be like 1500, and so 29% of that is going to be maximum energy shield. So I have a 320 flat energy shield helmet on right now, which is a pretty good number. 400 is kind of what I'm striving for, but this is still really good. If I take that helmet off and put this one on, I have 4700 energy shield. So this is like a really good budget item to get a shitload of energy shield for cheap, and then you can use Grim Feast to overcap and get really crazy levels of energy shield on top of, you know, having the double mitigation, double recovery thing. So again, just like the passive tree, I went over a lot of this stuff, like about my current setup, what I'm kind of using in my other video. I'll leave a link down in the description if you do want to go watch that and kind of see which skill gems and stuff I'm using. But yeah, I just kind of don't want to explain it all again. And in the mobalytics guide, I'll have kind of written explanations of everything just so it's sort of there. And yeah, like why I'm using what support gems, like priorities of stuff and all that. And yeah, it'll just be included because for a video like this, it would take me like 20 minutes to go through all this stuff, and it's just more worth it to have it in written form. So, but yeah, that's going to be it for the new player guide, guys. I've been playing QE1 and stuff, so I'm more of an experienced player. So if I did go over something that you might not have understood, maybe just pop a comment and I'll go over it in greater detail. I've done pretty well to like sort of dumb down things or like get to the roots of something. Dumb down's not really a great word. Get to the roots of like how a mechanic works and kind of explain up from there. And so yeah, I just wanted to make sure I did this in this video to sort of help out all the new players. And yeah, hopefully when you go do your monk, you just smooth sailing the whole thing. And I'll have like a mobalytics down in the description, which will go over like sort of like the supports and the skills and stuff that you want. And then also like all the skill trees, I'll sort of like piece them together and like leave some notes and stuff on it too. But yeah, guys, if you enjoyed, like, feel free to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing lots of videos like this. Probably going to do lots of new player guides soon because I feel like it's a decent opportunity to get people to understand more about the game, to shortcut a lot of people's knowledge about the game because, yeah, it's more fun when a lot of people know what they're doing because then we get way better builds and we get way better interactions and it's just more fun for everybody. Anyways, thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.